So anyway, not all writers are introverts. Never mind. Um, Today's panel is taking it in, using feedback to strengthen your story, and that takes many forms. So I'm going to start with a general question, and feel free to go down the row and introduce yourselves and then answer this. But who is anybody else to tell you what to write or how you've done it?
It's an awful thing. You know, all of us have the same fear. Somebody's going to look at it and you're going to feel compromised, or that you have to compromise yourself to fix it up or to do what they are suggesting. So everybody, almost everybody, comes to the table starting to think that way. But the only way you're going to have a great manuscript is if you tell that little story in your head that you are a learner and you're here to learn, you're here to grow, you're a good writer, you might even be a great writer. But if you want to be the greatest, you have got to get people to read your book before it's got a cover on it. Because once it's got a cover on it, who knows who's going to read it? And those folks will critique you and will do it in ways that you might not be happy with. So get all that taken care of before you put a cover on it. That's my 2 cents.
That's it.
So I'll be the contrarian because I'm not saying I did it, but you can change a whole book and copy it, even though you're not supposed to. So that means, hypothetically speaking, it already has a cover on it, and the editor might be slightly mad when you do these kind of things. Not suggesting you do it, but there's a point where the story is not the best it could possibly be, that you can take the right risks, and sometimes you don't see it till it's all nice and clean and copy it. I'm not saying do that, but I've learned through these years your gut is your best friend. Your gut will let you know if you're telling the right story. When you start in your career, you get a lot of feedback because you don't know what the hell you're doing. By the way, my name is Vanessa and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. My very first manuscript, I had my friends critique it. My friends. Girl, you did that thing right there! No, I did not do that. And after I sent that poor little manuscript out, it was summarily rejected by everyone. Everyone. And I had one rejection that was so horrible, where it was like they put a pox on my house and condemned all the races after me. So after rewriting that 125 times, joining appropriate critique groups, et cetera, that was my very first book. You get a voice. You need feedback, but there's a point where your inner self tells you that it's right.
I just want to make sure I got the question right.
Well, again, here as a historian, and just in terms of feedback that you would receive from beta readers or anyone, the question that I asked in general was, who the hell is anybody else to tell you what to do?
I think it's uniquely different for every person. I think for me as a historian, one, I will say, opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one. You're going to get everyone's opinion, whether you want it or not. But I do think, in my particular case, particularly my first book, I was writing about real people and someone who's really living. So I went to ask them if I was telling the story, if I was telling the story correctly. And then others, you sort of filter and feel it. Like you said, you feel it in your gut. You know when you've gotten off the course. Okay? You may not consciously recognize that, but I think you feel something's not working out right. But it just depends. And so, even after the fact, I have people come up and say, you should have said this and this. And I don't mean that ugly, but people will chastise you for all kinds of things. So, yes, I think you have to just learn to sort of roll with it. I also work with a law firm, 650 attorneys, and I did PR. So I had 650 cases in Boston. So I was used to a lot of cases. Very much.
how do you find that criticism and critique groups help you to grow, Vanessa?
Now, in my early years, so like I would say books 1 through 5 were, and for full disclosure, I'm just turned in book number 25. Okay? So full disclosure, since 20, thank you very much. The insanity is real. I started my first professional book when I rewrote 125 times. I rewrote it 125 times because I'm an engineer. This iteration, we're going to work on dialogue. This iteration, we're going to work on setting. This iteration, we're going to work on, the overarching art for character A, for character B, for character. Iterative. That's not the way to actually do this, but if you have an engineering brain, you work with what you got. Okay? My engineering brain. So I would suggest in the critique groups for books 1 through 5, I watched other writers. I am not them, they are not me. And sometimes early on in the critique group, based on the level of expertise, you'll get one opinionated person who will try and say, this is the way writing is supposed to be. Now, unless you're Nora Roberts, take that with a grain of salt. The great Nora Roberts says so, maybe. Or James Patterson, maybe. Or Stephen King, maybe. But Joe Smo, who's just writing just like you, take it with a grain of salt on the methodology to get there. You look for consensuses. You know, if everybody is having a problem with following the trend of your story, you have a problem. If everybody, majority, if the majority is, losing setting, you have a problem with setting. If, majority, look at the majority. And that really works in the beginning stages of your career. There's a point, though, where you're writing so fast, because like when I did critique groups, you would send 2 chapters in, and they would send you a group of 5, and you would be exchanging. And you have to wait a week or 2 weeks before you get that feedback. There's a point where that's too slow, and that's where you have to hire your own editor. You do things or you work with somebody who's writing at the same speed, because when you got to get the words down, you got to get the words. I'm not even sure if I answered your question, but that's what I got.
Oh, yes, you did.
Okay.
All right. So, in regard to seeing I Grow, your own story, and I know that I touched on this a bit this morning, but who was there to provide you with feedback in regard to your own story that you were willing to even listen to?
I'll tell you, I was so lucky to I had 2 critique groups. One that met for about 10 years under the tutelage of Suzanne Van Atten, the book editor for the AJC. And, we were all writing memoir. And we learned so much from each other. There were better writers than I in that group. And that's one important thing I found is try to surround yourself with people that have more experience than you, whose writing you really admire, whose opinion you respect. And then I had a second critique group, and my friend Anissa Gray was a member of that critique group. And so these were both operating over the long period of time that it took me to write Seeing I Grow. And I did. I took the drafts back. I rewrote. They went back to the critique group. A laborious and long, but very growth-promoting process. I'd written all my life, but as a college professor, I wrote using a different style. So I wanted this to be creative nonfiction, which I had to learn how to do. So I had what I thought was a complete manuscript, and I liked it. And as I would, for the umpteenth time, put a chapter in somebody's hands, pretty much my critique groups were saying, okay, you've got it, this is good. Except one day, a member of our critique group said, Beverly, I don't think your first chapter does what it's supposed to do. Well, crap. I had that attitude of,
Nope.
no. You know, this has been through how many critique groups? It's been revised. I love this chapter.
Were they right?
Yes. Because, yes, it took me a long time to see it, but then I bought a developmental editor for a big damn price that I, did not really want to pay. But let me tell you, this chap took the entire manuscript and he marked on almost every page, like you get it back from your teacher. And the bottom line, he said, let me summarize. Because I bought a first critique, a conversation with him, rewrite, look at it again, another conversation. It was worth every penny. He said two big things to me. One, a memoir is all about reflection. And when you reflect, you're doing it swell. Here's an example here where is a good critique, good reflection. Here's another example. But that he had marked all the way through the manuscript. Reflection, say more, develop this idea, say more. Okay. So all you see is time, energy, do I have the brain power? But the other big thing was, okay, your first chapter doesn't do it. Just what Gene had said. He said, your first chapter, you've got to introduce your key players, you've got to introduce the conflict, you've got to hook the reader into the story, and you've got to really do that on the first page, but then that first chapter is critical. He said, your chapter 17 should be one. Like really.
Because it throws people in the arrest, it throws people into the middle of the story.
Exactly. Right. Here we are. I'm not just born, I'm 15 in chapter 17. My mother is in full delusional state of being. It's a crisis. I'm trying to go to school and she wants me to listen to the pipes to hear the chinchillas that the guineas are growing in the basement. Like really. And I'm the managing editor of the school newspaper and I'm getting this big award. And my mother's got me listening to the pipes.
Okay.
So.
Okay. As much as I want to go into the chinchillas,
okay.
I'm going to hold you back and tell people to buy the book. But in addition to that, one of the things that I found in working with critique groups is if you're able to justify why you made the choices that you made, and if you're able to answer your own questions, then that serves as well with the feedback that you receive. You don't necessarily have to take it. But then also...
So I want to counter to a couple of things that have been said.
Yes.
Just from a different perspective. One, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Jeff Clemmons. I've written 2 books which are better than Ambien, that put you right to sleep. One is about Atlanta institution, Rich is a Southern institution, and the other is about Westview Cemetery. Lots of civil rights connections and stuff like that in there. So they are actually quite interesting and not informing, selling clothes and dead people. One of the things I would like to point out, though, that I think is a little different. You hear, and I just want writers, of those of you that are writing, to understand there is no foolproof method to do things. I often hear, blow through the first draft, get through the draft, do drafts. I have one draft for each book and that's it. Because I'm the kind of writer I can't move forward unless I'm comfortable with the text where I'm at. So I never have multiple drafts, I just have one. And I may get stuck on a section for a couple of weeks until I like where it's going. So I just want to counter, a lot of times people say you need to do all these different drafts. I don't think you have to. Also, I don't think you have to have criticism groups along the way. I did not have that in mind. What I did is I wrote sort of a report and did all that. I mentioned this earlier, I spent for my first book about 2.5 years researching it, and it took 6 weeks writing it. And then after the 6 weeks, I gave it to a select group of people that I trust to edit it, and I gave them feedback as well. And then to circle back to what you were saying, then I filter through whether I like what they said, don't like what they said, agree with it, don't agree with it. I have found that if someone criticizes you and it really gets you, that you really ought to pay attention to that. It's probably speaking to something that you need to fix that you might not have to fix.
And to counter your counter, um, you have to understand how you write. For me, I write in 3 passes. The first pass, no one in there, not even my mama will see this first pass, because it's me working through the characters getting from point A to point B. But everything is white rooms, white floors, white clothes. If I mention clothes at all, it's working on that developmental arc. The second layer is putting in the texture, the scenery, because to me the scenery and this is just Vanessaism, the scenery has to support the place has to support the scene. So I'm making sure that there are things, if it's ethereal, there are things in the room, there's things that they're noticing that's bringing that home through. And then the last time I go through, now we're making it all pretty. Now we're playing with white space on the page. We're, really, that's the version that folks get to see. But that's how your mind works. Like for me, if I don't see the whole thing, I can't thread that arc all the way through. I can't, I'm a talisman writer, as you mentioned earlier. If I make you focus on an object, I'm gonna bring that back. It's gonna mean something down the road because I don't want to play with my audience like that. If I'm making you pay attention to some, let's say something like a curtain or a lacing, it's gonna catch our fire. Something's gonna happen to it because I made you focus on this for a reason.
And maybe one of the differences is what we write. So we write on the converse.
Yes.
Your world building and world description is right. I'm pulling stuff out so that I can thread a narrative from a whole lot so that it can sit in a small space. You're doing it that opposite. So that does provide different viewpoints and ways to go after that.
And I love what you do because if it wasn't for people like you doing this hard work of actually, getting to the true history, I don't have the world to play with. I don't have those little vignettes and things. Like I told you, for Sister Mother Warrior, unfortunately, I had to translate French of Thomas Madio's. After the Haitian Revolution, he wrote his book 10 years. So he's actually talking to some of the fighters. He's talking to Mary Claire Bonnier, the former empress, all these people who are relevant, and bringing that in. So I had to use that 4 years of high school French and bonjour in order to get us there. But you get his nonfiction narrative threaded in so many different things that I was able to make you feel like you're there in the books I write. You don't get that if he is pontificating or if he is throwing in more of his modern day attitude towards this book. So we need his nonfiction.
But not all history writers are without all of us having a team, but some more so than others. So that's the one thing about me. I try to write without a viewpoint.
Okay.
In the fact.
In
the fact that I don't want to skew what the reader decides.
Sure. I think this whole notion of feedback too, and how much and how often, intersects with your development as a writer. I was changing the way I wrote dramatically, and I needed some education. I needed a support group. Plus, the tone that I wanted to wind up with was difficult for me to achieve. And I really did not, I could see now that in the early stages of joining Suzanne's critique group, I was really having trouble writing. And whereas, I'm accustomed to flowing a little bit more easily. And I couldn't write smoothly because I hadn't found my voice yet. And so I was searching for a long time. When I really found the tone and my voice, my writing changed. And I think now I'm a better writer for all that critique that I did have on book one. I'm working now on another book, and I find I'm not thinking critique group so much, you know, like you. You have developed as a writer, so you don't need, you know, 5 people looking at every chapter, but you might employ some at the end or at different stages.
So I said books 1 through 5 was critique group, and then the schedule is not enough, or it's quick enough, and you want to be able to somebody needs to look at your book as a whole. Um, and so I have a personal editor that has been with me. So my little bit more disclosure. First book was recently published. Books 2 through 15 were independently published. That's when that was before publishing got woke and decided that black folks were reading. But that's when narratives solely focused on black women or women of color were very difficult sales in publishing. And publishing owes you nothing. They believed that there was no audience for these books. So by independently publishing, I proved that there's actually audience for this. So much so that they start knocking on your door. Hey, Vanessa, we see what you're doing over there. Give us another shot. But I kept my same editor, my same personal editor. So whether it's a proposal or the full book, Felicia goes through everything. Because now we're in sync, and it's a payment. I pay her because, people will do things, freebies kind of things, but as a writer, that's part of your budget to have somebody to go over your work. Because I turn it, even though William Morrow or HarperCollins or Kensington has their own editing systems. You want the best version of your work so that they're just concentrating on the story. And so their feedback is more pointed to where the story they think may be tweaked or something like that, as opposed to, you can't find a comma that says that. So the only other thing is, on your story, Beverly, when I first wrote Queen of Exiles, which is the story of Marie-Louise Christophe, the only queen of Haiti, we have a sensitivity reader. So we've got, look at the level of, so we hit now, but you're like, Vanessa, you're black. Why you need a sensitivity reader? I am not Haitian. This woman, Marie-Louise Christophe, my father is from Trinidad and Tobago, so I got my West Indian creds, but I'm not Haitian. And I don't want to make the mistake of thinking that my Trinidadian value system is the same. And it's a little side note, so let me make this quick. In Sister Mother Warrior, I actually almost offended the Haitian people because I hate the banane. It's like that cream of wheat, and I made Drea Toya hate cream of wheat, and then the Haitian sister was like, "How could you do this? How could she hate this?" And of course, I had to fix that. And you think it's a trivial thing, but apparently this Haitian cream of wheat is a bad thing. So I fixed that. But in Sister Mother Warrior, the sensitivity reader is reading it. She's loving the book, but she's like, chapter 7 and 8 and 9 is where you should begin the book. Because that's the most point of conflict. Even though, when you're telling historical, sometimes you want to go chronologically because it's easier for the reader to follow along. She's like, if you chart 7, 8, and 9, this is where you are. You feel her plight. You know everything that's happening. She's in exile. She's in London. And all her jewels have been stolen. The money that she was going to sell these jewels to save her daughter and herself, pay her way, it's gone. She's like, that is the most important and impactful. So you have to reorder it. And this is the sensitivity reader, that's not their job, but they were so involved in the manuscript and flow, and she was right. So that's all.
That's good.
So, my next question was going to be about notes from the publisher to go back to what you were saying. Yet nonetheless, I feel like it is important for those newer writers in the room to know that if you continue on your journey and your journey is successful, that there will come a time where you will have a publisher, you will have publishers' notes. So remember this for them because we believe in you. And so when the people who are paying you tell you that there is something that they do not like, how much do you cave on what you have delivered? And is there anything in particular, any examples you could give? Oh,
We
okay.
got some.
Yes,
But I
please.
mean, so my second book, I don't like the cover and I don't like the title, and I didn't get to choose either, contractually. But some of the things you have to sort of live with, I guess. So it's pick about what hill you're gonna die on the cover or the inside of the book and the caption. Um, I'll tell you what my train of thought.
No, feedback.
Feedback from the publisher.
Publisher.
Yes.
For the most part, when my books were written, I didn't really get any feedback about things that maybe need to be changed as far as structure. But I interestingly had a publisher had done my first book and was contracted to do my second one. I had to postpone for a year or push the date back. And then when I called to do that, they wanted to drop my second contract. Well, the way my contract's set up, they're contractually obliged. I am contractually obliged to give them first pass of my next two books. So they said, well, we've just decided we don't want to publish your second book. And I said, wait a minute, you something. I've spent the last 2.5, 3 years of my life working on those sports publications over now. You're not going to. So I said, and I worked for a law firm at the time, so it was itty bitty without any Sanders. And I'm joking when I say itty bitty, but I just said to them, I said, that's fine, then you have to send me a written piece of paper saying that you despite my contract wholeheartedly and don't get first choice. So that's really the only negatives that I've had with my publishing are not having full control over creative, and it's while we think it's artistic, it's also a business. And so you have to remember with publishing, it's all about, it's a lot of moving parts. So it's not, while we all work in an abstract sort of over here on a little closet, maybe on the other side, you're by yourself all the time, there are all these other factors that can play. I personally hate the fact, and we were talking about this last night, that now as a writer, you have to do your marketing team and everything else. And that's frustrating because I want to focus on the other things, not so much, maybe not my own expertise.
So I got stories. Like Jeff says, the title is just give up. Okay, unless it's totally offensive to some culture or some your family members, just give up. That's not a battle you don't win. On the covers, my contracts now say I have influence on the covers. And that might have been because we were that publisher was knocking on the door. They thought they could just colorize a photo and make somebody who wasn't
No.
of color
Good Lord.
appear ashy and need lotion. And thought they could get away with that. And I told him to tell them, no, that's not going to work. And they said, no, trust us, Vanessa. And of course, as soon as they put the cover up, the Twitter detectives found the original picture and put the book post and they said, look what they're doing. And it was a big hot story. So now I have a say, not a veto power, a say in the covers. And that is, you get a little bit more influence. And once again, now that they're a little bit more responsive to being sued on the or these Twitter dust storms and things like this, you will get that. When I turned in Island Queen, which is the story of Dorothy Curran Thomas, the richest woman in the West Indies, had an affair with Prince William, saved generational wealth for her people in Guyana. It was 200,000 beautiful words. My editor was like, oh, you turned in 2 books for them. And because I was telling her whole story, and at that point in time, I wasn't sure what I should cut out. And so I said, okay, I'll make some notes. And so she suggested that we didn't really need to see her beginning, her origin story. So when she's a child, she is the daughter of Massa, her mother's enslaved, and you see this dynamic with her stepbrother who's very jealous of her, but it sets this landscape of the torments that she goes through before she has a scene where she is buying her freedom. And I was, and she was like, let's start there. And I was like, if we start there, no one's going to understand what she went through and why this is so significant and why everyone who shows up at that meeting where she's got the lawyers, she's got her father who she's literally buying her freedom from her father, this tormenting stepbrothers, and all these people in the room, plus the history of everything that she's survived. You don't get why this is such a monumental moment. Yeah. So that was a point where I pushed back, and once I did strip out another 75,000 words and kept that, we were all good to go. And it's people get it, and it's very powerful.
So one of the things that I'm gathering, both in regard to just even on a fundamental development level versus once the book is to the publisher, not only is it helpful to build a trusted team, but it is also imperative to trust yourself, trust your judgment, and trust your own voice. Be willing to listen, but if you're bold enough to want to put your story out there, be bold enough to stand by it when it needs to.
And sometimes you may be the only person championing that story, but and you may have to be able to walk away from the time, or walk away from that hope.
It's a balance to try and figure it out. Have you had any issue where?
Just, I really have a great publisher. There are problems going with independent houses that I didn't realize at the beginning, but in spite of all that, She Writes Press is a high quality set of women who run this publishing house. They've got expert editors, artistic team. I had complete control over the title, the cover, everything, complete. And complete control all the way through until the final, actually I was a copy editor who caught me on the, because you said the overuse of a curse word. That was very common in my household, and I used it to show the language of the home. But she said, look, you got 15 occasions. And
What letter does it start with?
It starts with a G.
What? Oh goodness, never mind. Okay.
So I counted them and I found them, and I said, I think she's right. I don't really need 15 times to say that word if I'm just trying to make a point. So I got it way, way, way down. And, but it's still in there. And we never fought about that. We didn't really fight. We just presented. And I could have left the 15 in, probably. But I was glad that it was pointed out to me, because I really wasn't aware that I had used it that much.
One of the things that a teacher of mine, a high school teacher of mine once said, was to be sparing in regard to colorful language or slurs, because what you're doing in terms of tone in regard to writing is you want to save the startling language for when it will have its most impact. You don't want to desensitize somebody, because if you're using it 15 times, then it just becomes part of the anything.
Yeah.
And so then when you want to raise the stakes, what do you do?
What do you do that?
Oh, and so, but getting back to critique, even though again, well, no, let's stay there. So what are fundamental lessons that you learned from teachers that still, that echo with you nearly every day?
So, I think we all have teachers that we love. I had a high school English teacher that I loved. She loved my creative work, even though I got F's on the paper because my grammar was atrocious. I learned that, but one of my mentors was actually there were two people. Carr, he's a biographer. He's on History Center. He's talking about cutting. They made her cut over 1,000 pages in her book on Paul. And so it's to the best.
That's 25,000.
Yeah. So her books were they were 1,000 pages printed. But another friend of mine, the childhood neighbor and friend, is Mary Hood, who's an author and a writer.
Yes.
And she has always given me really good advice. There's being writing is hard work, it's lonely work, and to sit and stay with it. So I think her task, she's always been solid rock. And she's also speaking of someone who has a very good finish one off and the rest of them and change her because she did not want to do something else. And good for her, she can post it.
For me, it just three names come to mind. Margie Lawson, and for all the writers in the room, margielawson.com. If you are struggling with putting emotion in your writing, if you're struggling with, you know, how to add texture to passages, or from, in my case, how to control. Because, you know, if I had my druthers, everything's purple. I'm gonna purple up everything. Purple language, you know, just gonna purple the world up. Control. Margie Lawson, I think margielawson.net. She has packages. And if you ever get a chance to do one of her retreats, she's an amazing woman. Beverly Jenkins sat me down one day and told me to remind me. I think it was she just sometimes people just I firmly believe God puts people in your path when you're having one of those moments where you're like wondering if I should really be doing this work. And she says your words are important. They take whatever time that they need to write it, to do it, but they are important, so make sure that you do it. And then lastly is Kristen Higgins. She says, write the most dangerous manuscript you can possibly write. If you feel you're going to let up on a character and give them an out, don't. If you feel like you're just going to pull your punches and make it smooth and happy and just miraculously things, make them go through what they need to go through in your writing. Don't pull your punches. Do the most dangerous manuscript you can possibly.
I haven't heard the word dangerous, but I like that. A person who's influenced me an awful lot is Sue William Silverman. Her early book on father, I remember terror because I remember you, sexually abused this child from age 5 till adulthood, and she tells it all. And she writes a wonderful methods book called, Be Fearless. And it's provocative, and it did for me what my early teachers did for me. That is, they helped me find a voice, they empowered me, and I felt like I want to be like Sue William Silverman. If I'm going to tell it, I'm going to tell it. I'm going to tell all of it. And some of it might not be pretty, but that's what a memoir should be, the truth. And so here you get it all. I did not take out big pieces that I wanted to hide. So it's all right there. So be fearless.
When writing, even if you aren't using beta readers necessarily, or if you use beta readers as you go, how often are you thinking about audience and how they will respond and what they want to know? Because I personally write from cliffhanger to cliffhanger to cliffhanger just to keep myself invested, but I also do that with like two or three readers that I keep along the way.
At the same time as you're writing.
Often, yes.
I don't, like I said, I don't really use beta readers anymore just because of the time frame.
Yes.
But I have my personal editor that I send to. And the book that I may have rewritten and copyrighted, which will be out next year. So if you understand it's a historical romance, you understand the structure of a historical romance, right? The very first chapter, there used to be like this 5-page rule where hero meets heroine within 5 pages, yada, yada, yada. It's kind of, but that's really just. First 7 chapters were focused on somebody who's not his romance. Personally, I don't know how you get that to copy it. I mean, that's like a fundamental thing. And so, and I wrote this. I sent this in with my whole chest. I sent this in. But I knew I just knew it was coming back to me, so I could fix it. I fixed it in copy. So, you just know, if you've studied your genres. I write historical fiction, historical mystery, and historical romance. Each one of these have a different formula. so to speak, or even different audience expectation. And I know that a romance reader who read this book would like the setting, would like the flow, but they will feel gypped of getting this invested in the dude, and it's not his book. So I had to specifically rewrite that first third of the book. And then, once you rewrite something, it threads through the entirety of the book. But you have to think about your reader, because if you're going for commercial printing, commercial success, commercial is traditional publishing, there's an expectation that these books shall sell. For commercial fiction, particularly. So you have to keep the audience in mind. If you don't, you have don't cry when you get slammed on Amazon. Don't cry when you get slammed on Goodreads. Don't cry when you get slammed on NetGalley. You publish this, you put it out there, they didn't get it. Audiences are really smart. Sometimes, authors think they're smarter than the audience, and that's a really bad place to be. So I always keep the readers in mind. The other thing I also do is there's certain words I will not use, even though they are period appropriate, period accurate for my time frame. I'm not going to give those words power. There are other ways to say the hard things that you need to say. So I try and be very, 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 very intentional in the language that I use. But you have to understand the audience you're trying to get to. I'm trying to get to young people who are forgetting history. I'm trying to get to people who are scared of history. I want everyone to be able to to access these books, whether it's the romance or the fiction or the mysteries. You're going to gain something in that realm. And so I always write with the audience.
See, I think I get to cheat. Because I don't have to worry so much about what the audience thinks and tell a story that unfolds as it actually happens. So I can't change the way that it's happening. Mm-hmm. Where I have to worry about audience is readability, and if I'm staying on the main thread, the main narrative. Because it's very easy, particularly when you're writing history, but I think with everything, historical fiction, I love the rabbit hole. I'd rather research all day than write. Like, as Dorothy Parker, I quote her in my previous thing, about that, the art of writing is to find apps to share. I also am like her too in that I like having written. So, it depends, but you get to cheat a little bit. So the audience for me on the end just make sure. I try to not have strong voice as far as my opinions. I also try to make it really graphic as well. I think sometimes history can get bogged down. When you're writing history, if you get too much into detail, you bog down or superfluous stories that don't really have much to do with the main narrative, and that's extremely easy to do. Keeping that in mind.
Yes. Yes. I mean, knowing that you were coming from a writing group that you utilize, what, in your opinion, makes the person who provides the most necessary feedback?
I work with critique groups all the way through, but mainly they've seen chapter by chapter. Very few of them have seen the whole book. Really, just one. And she and I became partners, just the two of us, split off from these other groups. But I did ask about 6 people to be the beta readers, and I wanted to make sure that I had young and old. The story starts in the 40s. The audience is not necessarily my age contemporaries. I'd like the young people to read the story too, so I needed to hear from them. I needed a whole range of ethnic group folks reading it. So I picked a group on some of those criteria. The civil rights issues coming in the 60s. I wanted perspectives on that from African American readers. So that was a different kind of feedback because it was the entire manuscript, and I was asking pretty pointed questions of the beta readers. You can direct the kind of feedback that you get from them by giving them a framework for thinking about the
I
book.
think that,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say one thing I think you have to be careful of is you've got to filter the filters.
Yes.
Because it's particularly in writing when you're talking about history, everybody says it's the truth, it's the truth. Well, wait a minute, it's the truth that you saw. So there's that whole old adage about you have four people on the corner, on each corner of the intersection, they see an accident, they all see it different ways, but it's all their truths. I think you have to be able to realize that and realize some of the feedback you're getting may be filtered, not right or wrong, but there's a truth that may not match what you're trying to do.
One of the things that I actually had forgotten about that I did in regard to my beta readers was I was sending out a chapter at a time as it was being as I was building it, because I didn't have a publisher, I didn't have anyone to read. So what I did was I sent out each chapter and I said, the only thing that I need you to tell me is to keep going. Because I want to keep going, just let me know that you want me to keep going. And don't ask me about what happens, because that might spoil it in my head before we've written it down. But just let me know. And they did. And it was just the most invaluable thing to know that even though you were like alone at the keyboard, you aren't alone. And that there are people who have you and stand with you. And that's one of the most valuable things I did in regard to like feedback and building a community like this one. Not to just go off on my own tangent there, but so when you target your feedback, what are the different points where you ask for different things, obviously, but like what do you ask for most often?
Well, the overall, what meaning, what is your takeaway after reading it? I want to make sure that it has some resemblance to my intention. And, is the book a book you'd recommend? Is it powerful in any way? I want overall impression of the book as well as specific comments.
And with my personal editor, for instance,
Yes.
I asked, did you like it?
Yeah.
And then there are key scenes, like, how did the scene hit? Like, in addition to just the feedback she's going to give me, I want to make sure that, like, did you catch this? So I have a list of questions, because if you want we as humans, we also want approval, right? We still want approval. We want to make sure, and you've got to have that relationship with the geek group or a beta reader that you trust them. But they're not just going to, because I told you, I got a whole bunch of rejections because the homegirls were like, yeah, it's good. No, it wasn't. You need the feedback. And then, I always say, if I need to push, do I need to push this character some more? Because they know me, they know my style, they know what I'm trying to do, and they know that they can push. And it's not going to hurt. This is nothing, it's professional. So if you say, I hate this, or da-da-da-da-da, we're going to make those changes. It's not personal. And that's something that takes time to divorce yourself. Because you birthed this. You birthed this manuscript. You blood, sweat, and tears. And how much time in order to do that? But you got to divorce that. It even helps, like, when you get those Amazon ratings, the Goodreads, that you divorce that. It's not you. It's that they just didn't hit them right. Maybe they upset Tony when they wrote before. It's not you, but that's part of your growth as a writer. It's not you.
I think you hit it on one. I always ask for the self. That's my first one. And
you always ask, did it suck?
No, that's always my big thing. Did you hate it?
Yep.
Did you hate it? Did it suck? And then I want to get into the weeds and parse it out, and then figure it out. But overall, I want the first impression. But I also find too, I sometimes you ask people to read stuff, and they just know it's great.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait. Can you do more? What don't you like? What don't you like?
Yeah.
And you're like, pull it out. Can you give me something? Because sometimes I think I would like a little more interest. what works, what doesn't work, what did you like, what you didn't. Doesn't mean I'm going to agree with you, listen to you, do anything you say, but sometimes I think we all struggle as writers with wanting people to be honest with us too.
Do you find that there's a certain importance to the word beta reader? When I asked people to be a beta reader, it was like it was an honor, and they knew it was big. It's different from just any kind of reader. Every single one of them gave me everything I needed. You know, I asked questions, they in detail gave answers, and I was kind of impressed with that whole process.
Just to clarify,
Go on.
my first book came out in 2012. I was a lit major 30 years ago that I read all the time. I didn't know what a beta reader was until last year. Everybody know what a beta reader? We never used that term. We just said, will you read it? And then beta reader, someone had asked me to read their novel and get feedback, and that's really the first time I'd ever heard that term. So for people that don't know,
Yes. A beta reader is someone who reads the book either as it is being developed or after it has been developed, but before it goes to an editor, before it goes to an agent, before it goes to a publisher. It might have got to an editor already. But and also to define a term from this morning for anyone who watched this morning, microfiche is essentially the internet, but like older. Anyway, but never mind. So in the time that we have left, and I know that we have lots of other writers from various backgrounds and various stages of the publishing journey in the room with us. Do you have any questions that I did not ask that you would like feedback on? And please provide feedback on my feedback panel.
But like a feedback loop.
Yeah, except we don't want to get too close to the microphone because then there will be feedback during the feedback panel and feedback loop, and that will be bad. So have we covered our bases? The one thing that we did not do, again, was properly introduce everyone and get them to tell us about their books. So please, again, all of the books are on sale outside. My book is on sale outside now, which it wasn't this morning. Nonetheless, please, if you would, hold up your book if you have it, and tell people why they should. Thank you, 5 minutes.
Well, so this is a memoir, Seeing Eye Girl, a memoir of madness, resilience, and hope.
And your name?
I am Beverly, J. Armento, and I've been in the Atlanta area since 1975. I guess this is home now. But why you should read it? Well, when the Surgeon General says mental health is the defining health issue of our times, this is not a story that's grounded in the 50s. It's a case study that has relevance in today's world. And when the Secretary of Education says we've got to change this toxic atmosphere that teachers are living in and public schools are living in, it's time for us to pay attention to how important teachers are in the lives of vulnerable children. That's mine.
Thank you.
I hope you do.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Vanessa Riley. I write historical fiction. I think they have out there Island Queen. Island Queen was a Good Morning America buzz pick. It's about the story of a woman who should actually be in our history books, Dorothy Kirwan Thomas. She was the richest woman in the West Indies, started her life enslaved, bought her freedom, bought the freedom of her family, goes on to save generational wealth for women of color and black women in the colony of Guyana. True story. Found her like in a political cartoon. So watch political cartoons or where you can get really good stuff. Sister Mother Warrior is the two women who shaped the Haitian Revolution. It is Georgia's literary fiction book of the year. For those who like structure, the way this is told is like a prophecy, and it's unfolding and show you really the revolution is 50 years. Most people only focus on the last 10. most people only focus on the men, but in my opinion, without Grand Toria and Mary Claire, the way the war is prosecuted, the way the Constitution is done, would not have happened without these two women. And we talked about Queen of Exiles. This happens about, these are not sequels, but history, keeps going. So this is about 10 years after this book. She is the queen of Haiti. Haiti, the unified nation of Haiti, has now split into two pieces. The coloreds, who believed that they had more education than the blacks and the black generals, have gone to the south. The blacks have stayed in the north, and King Henri Christophe, who was Jean-Jacques Dessalines' number 2 man, decides that if we look like all of Europe and have a kingdom, we will be respected. You'll learn exploits about the kingdom, like they brought vaccinations to the kingdom. You'll learn about the science. You'll learn about the balls. But the kingdom is overthrown, and Louise takes her 2 daughters. They escape to Europe, and they have to start life over. And literally, the jewels that she has, the crown, are stolen 2 nights after they get it collected. And that's how she was going to fund their exile. So that's that. And then, if you like mystery, boom. Murder in Westminster. You get 1806, which all abolition movements in the world stopped because Haiti is now free. What if you're a woman of color in that era with privilege? She wants to get the world righted, get the abolition movement started again, but people keep dying around her. So, like, Murder, She Wrote, in the middle. Murder in Westminster is the first in the series, and this is the second book in the series. And if anybody has read the first book, I might give away this card.
And
my name is Jeff Clemmons. I've written 2 histories. One history is about riches. I got 1 minute. I got to wrap this up. One, it's regional history, but riches was all throughout the South. It's a cultural temple, an icon of Atlanta. Also played into national politics, the civil rights movement. MLK finished first night in jail because of riches, and JFK was elected 36th president of the United States because of them having riches. So go read that. The other one is about Western Cemetery, which I know people are like snore. It's not your average cemetery. It's 600 acres in size. It's just on the west side of Atlanta. Most people have never heard of it, even though it's been around since 1884. My 3rd book I'm writing on is Francis Newman, leading African novelist from the 1920s who would have been Virginia Woolf's rival as she lived past age 45. She's been forgotten to history, so I hope to resurrect her story. But your local history, there's a lot of history in that. Don't negate it.
our next panel, I believe, is going to be First Pages, is it not? It is my favorite panel every single year of the conference.
Yeah.
Y'all,
Can I share our story?
sure, yes.
My First Pages was read at the last in person, and I was gone already, and Benji and Zach came up to me the next day and said that the agent had wanted to hear mine, and that's how I landed my agent here at Broadly.
Yeah.
So, so it's a good thing that I made it.
Yes. All of you, thank you so much. All of you, it has been a delight all day long. I know that I'm insane, but like, still, thank you so much for everything. And again, go out, buy books, read books, write books, publish books.
Yeah.